So by now, y'all are probably aware that we are deep into mid-year content, and actually we're almost at the end, but not before we cover my pride and joy and also my shame, which is the series. So for the mid-year series check-in, we do it in two parts because your girl reads a lot of series, or at least starts a lot of series, and to do it all at once in July, it's exhausting. So in this part one, we are going to be talking about all of the series I've completed so far this year, as well as the ones that I'm currently up to date on. So they have no installments publishing in 2024, but they will eventually have installments publishing. And then finally, the series that I've DNF'd, of which there are many. I think that this is the year with the highest amount of series DNF'd, at least at this point in the year. It's a lot. And then in the second part, which you will see in just a couple of days, we will be talking about my shame, which is all of the series that I've either started or made progress on this year that I could either finish or catch up on, if only that was something that I did. But getting into our first installment, we have 11 series we're going to be talking about today, which is 2 more than last year. So this is actually better than last year, because I would rather that we had more series talked about in this installment than we do in the second installment, because this is all of the stuff that we've wrapped up in some way, essentially. When I said I have a lot of DNFs, I meant it, guys. I'm going to be talking about 2 series I've finished, 2 I'm up to date on, which leaves 7 that I have DNF'd. So we'll start off with the celebration of what I finished, and we will conclude with the ones that I'm just never going to finish because I just simply cannot. So the first series that I wrapped up this year was Crescent City by Sarah J Maas. Now, before you all come at me in the comments, I know that there are going to be more books in this series, but I believe that they are going to be kind of like a Court of Silver Flames. So like, this trilogy is wrapped up, there'll be more stories in the world, which will be called like Crescent City 4, but the like core trilogy is done for now. Maybe for me forever. No, I'm kidding. Or am I? Is the question. But if you guys are unfamiliar with this series, this book is my favorite book ever. Book 3 is my worst book of the year so far. This one is an urban fantasy series following a half-fae woman called Bryce Quinlan, who is tasked with investigating a string of murders by the Archangel of the city, because he believes that she has a personal tie to this killer. They believed that they'd already caught him, but it seems that the person that they potentially arrested is not the person who is the murderer. And because this is a dangerous task, she's assigned a personal bodyguard in the shape of the fallen angel Hunt Athalar. This was the last book I think that I read in 2023, because I reread it, and then I've reread book 2 and then read book 3 for the first time this year, and my god, was it awful. In my mid-year book freakout tag, I talk about how much I just really didn't like book 3. It was a massive disappointment. This is everything that I wanted, hoped and dreamed it would be. Book 2 and 3 are dead to me. They're dead to me. They didn't make sense. The characters were acting out of character in a way that was really disappointing. The plot was so anticlimactic. This was more high stakes than book 3. For why? For why? I wasn't happy, but at least it's done. I will still continue reading Sarah J Maas because I'm a simp, but if the quality does not improve, I want to say across the next 2 books, I hate to say it, but I might be done. I don't know if I can keep doing this to myself at this point. The other series that I finished is the Poison series by Maria V. Snyder, which is another instance where the first book was great and then the last book was just not. So this one is following a young woman called Yelena, who is due to be executed for murdering the son of a general. But just before her execution, she is pulled out of the dungeons by the commander's advisor and assassin, Valak, who offers her the job as food tester to the commander in exchange for her life. So she is trained in the art of poisons to be better at her job, and all the while that she's working for the commander, she has to be looking over her shoulder because the general whose son she's killed does not believe that he has got his justice and he is potentially out for revenge. So I read the entire trilogy in 2024. I do know that this is the first 3 books in a larger 9-book series called, I think that's the Chronicles of Ixia. This is the study series, like the first 3. So I've read the first part, but not the whole overarching thing. Book 1 I really enjoyed. It had not necessarily a slow pace, but like a good pace for an introduction to a series where we really got connected to the characters, like we learned a lot about the world. And then in book 2, the world expanded. It wasn't quite as good as this, and I thought that the end was rushed, but like I still enjoyed it. Book 3 was just wall-to-wall action with the main character passing out in between to transition between one action scene to the other. It was not a good time, and I'm real sad because like I've always thought that I would really like this series. When I read book 1 and really enjoyed it, I was like, I'm onto a winner here. And now I don't think I'm going to continue with the rest of the books. I want to. No, I don't. I want to, but I don't want to is the issue. Now for the series that I'm up to date on. So this is not a big feat. It's truly not. I have read I have read 2 books that are the first book in 2 series, and the sequel won't be published this year, therefore I am up to date. The first one is Feybound by Sarah El-Arifi. I am a big fan of Sarah El-Arifi actually, but this one is about 2 sisters, and the eldest one is a warrior, the younger one is a seer. And I'm pretty sure that on the day that the elder one is promoted, her younger sister comes to her, and I can't remember what the official prophecy is, like what it actually is, but it's something like you'll seek glory out east. So she is leading this like group of soldiers, a troop, a battalion, whatever the official term is, out into this mission, which should just be a very easy routine mission. And she remembers what her younger sister says, and she then is like, okay, cool, like we'll go seek glory out east. And she leads her troop into an ambush. So she is actually exiled from the elven lands for this, and her younger sister and the elder sister, Yeren's second in command, go voluntarily into exile to follow her, and they all end up stumbling upon the Feylands. Now this is a big deal because this is a world that used to have elven, Fey and human people in, but now only the elves remain, or so they thought. I really enjoyed this one, not quite as much as I enjoy the Ending Fire trilogy by Sarah El-Arifi, which is weird because this was published afterwards, but it definitely feels more of a debut than I think that the Final Strife did. So I did enjoy it. I had a good time with it. I did think it was a little bit predictable, but like I said, I'm a big fan of Sarah El-Arifi, and I was so impressed by the sequel to the Final Strife that there's no way that I won't be reading the sequel to Feybound. One of my favorite books of the year was The Crimson Moth by Kristen Cicerelli. This one, I'm not sure how many books are going to be in it. I think it might be a duology, but it is following a woman called Rune who is a witch, but before she knew that she was a witch, she had to voluntarily turn her grandmother over to the witch hunters at this time where there was like political upheaval and all of the witch queens were overthrown, and anybody found with magical powers was executed. So with her grandmother's permission, Rune turned her grandmother over to save herself from execution, and in the 2 years since that happened, Rune has been dedicating herself to freeing witches from the witch hunters. So she's looking for this woman called Seraphine, and she manages to find her right at the beginning of this book, but she unfortunately does not get to her before the witch hunters do. So as Seraphine was a friend of her grandmother and also close to the witch queens, Rune is trying to find any information that can help her to release her. So she starts to cozy up to Gideon Sharp, who is the captain of the witch hunters. On the flip side of that, Gideon has been haunted by this like Robin Hood kind of figure, the Crimson Moth, who is Rune. And after talking to some of his allies, he does suspect that Rune may potentially be the Crimson Moth. And so he starts to cozy up to her to try and figure out if his suspicions are correct. So this is like a fake dating situation where both sides have ulterior motives, and they're both like falling for each other as they know that they can't be together, because Gideon will never accept Rune for being a witch because of his past trauma, and Gideon knows that his younger brother, Rune's best friend, is in love with her, and so he would never overstep that if not for this mission. I loved this. I didn't think I was going into it because it is marketed as a YA fantasy, but it absolutely blew me away, and it is the romance, the relationship between the 2 main characters that I really enjoyed. I really loved that one of their love languages was just gifting each other clothing. I thought that it was great, and I absolutely just flew through this one and it blew me away. So I'm really looking forward to book 2, which I think is released early next year. Next up, we have the DNFs, which is by far the largest section in this video. I will go through the ones that I currently still have copies of first, and then we'll get into the ones that I've on hold on to start off with. The first one is the most recent read, which is Dark Prince Road by Parker S. Huntington and LJ Shen. I could be persuaded to continue in this series, but it is just highly unlikely, which is why I've decided to include it, because this is one of the most unhinged contemporary romances that I've ever read in my life, and it was entertaining within that. Like, I was entertained the entire time I was reading this. I just don't think I'm going to be continuing. So this one is about this absolutely awful human called Romeo, who goes to a debutante ball and asks this girl like if she wants to hook up, and she's like, yeah, sure, let's go. But she's like a gorgeous, pure daughter from a southern town who's engaged to another man. So they hook up, and he purposefully like reveals it to the entire crowd at this debutante ball, including her parents. And because he has besmirched her honor, he convinces her dad that she has to marry him instead of her fiance, who just so happens to be his business rival. So she goes kicking and screaming to live with him. I mean, they fall madly in love. It's a romance. It was just unhinged. Like, the behavior of both of these main characters was really something, and it actually is pretty much just the first book in the Bridgerton series, because all that she wants is a baby. Like, that's her driving force, and he absolutely does not want to continue his father's legacy. Like, he wants the family to end with him because of how much he hates his father, and that is kind of a big driving force throughout this plot. Now, the sequel does follow one of his friends called Zach, who, of the 3 friends that these books follow, I would be the most interested in. But if the question is like, can I be bothered to devote that much time to read another book in this series? I mean, there are better things that need my time that I should be reading instead of book 2 in this series, and I actually would not read book 3 because the guy in that one is like a predator. One that started off really strong and kind of derailed in the second half for me was Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This one is the first book in, is it the Orisha cycle? It's called The Legacy of Orisha. I actually genuinely barely remember what this one is about at this point, but I know that it's set in a world where magic used to exist and it doesn't anymore, and it is multi-perspective. Our main character, Zele, is somebody who has the potential to have magic, but because there's no magic in the world, she can't actually do anything with it. But all of the people who would be able to wield magic are still marked by bright white hair, and they're also like oppressed and discriminated against because of it. So one day she goes into the city and she ends up meeting, without realizing who she is, the crown princess of this world, who is fleeing the castle with an artifact that has the ability to kind of bring back magic. It's only temporary, but together they decide that they're going to see if they can work out how to bring magic back for good. And they are being followed by the princess's brother, who has been sent by his father to hunt them down and bring the artifact back to the castle or palace or whatever it is. But this started off really strong. I was really enjoying it. And then in the second half, I can't remember whether it was like kind of the pacing picked up or whether it started to feel quite so seamless. Like, it just wasn't the same book by the end that it was at the beginning, and for that reason, knowing that a lot of people don't like book 2 in the series, I've decided that I'm not going to be continuing. This one is one that I actually really thought I was going to love, and sadly I did not, and I just don't really know what didn't work for me in this one, and that is Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. So I don't know how many books this series is going to be, but it is a fantasy romance inspired by Norse mythology. In this one, we are following a woman who is married to a guy that she hates, and one day her husband speaks to the Jarl and convinces the Jarl that he doesn't want to be married to her anymore either, and so the Jarl challenges her to a fight to the death, which to everybody around them seems really extreme, just for the sake of a guy that wants to get out of his marriage. So he actually puts his son in the ring with her, who is this unchallenged warrior that is blessed by the gods and has like unparalleled skills in battle, as well as being able to like summon this flaming axe. So when he pretty much has her up against the wall and like she's about to die, she gives in and she uses the power that she has been hiding her entire life, and she is actually blessed by the gods herself and can summon a shield. The reason why this power is so special is because there is a prophecy that when the shield maiden is found, all of the, are they called Jarldoms, will unite under one king. So this Jarl then decides that he is going to be that one king, and he takes the shield maiden and he marries her and he forces her to be this shield maiden figure and unite the towns and the villages under his banner. The Jarl also orders his son to look after Freya and to protect her so that she can help to fulfill his destiny, and the two of them grow closer over the course of the book. So I thought that this was decent. I just didn't like it very much. I think that it was like quite decently paced. It's a good balance between plot driven and character driven, where you do feel like a little bit connected to the characters. It doesn't necessarily lack character development, but at even intervals throughout this book, there are moments of action to keep the plot moving. I think my kind of issue with it is that I felt like we were just being told everything from the main character's perspective. I wasn't really believing what she was saying because I was only really taking her word for it, if it makes sense. So I feel like while this was enjoyable, and I do think like it's a pretty good book, I just wasn't immersed or invested in it in a way that I wanted to be to truly care about this story. The first series that I DNF'd this year was actually the Hurricane Wars by, is it Thea Guanzon? This one is I could not tell you what it's about at this point, I'm not gonna lie, but I thought that it was absolutely ridiculous. It's a Reylo fanfic in a fantasy world, and I think it's this girl whose territory is about to be taken over by like the Kylo Ren figure's people, and so she has to flee and she joins the army of a different country. It just, I was gonna say it lost me, but it just never had me to begin with. I thought that it was a little bit all over the place, and it really relied on people knowing who Reylo were to get any kind of character development, because it wasn't very well established. It never really described the characters, and I just thought that it lacked, I guess, depth a little bit. I also DNF'd the Splintered series by A.G. Howard, but I did like relatively enjoy the first book. This one it's not an Alice in Wonderland retelling exactly, because the main character is like a descendant of Alice, and Alice in this story was the inspiration for Alice's adventures in Wonderland. So there's actually a madness running through her family where they think that they can like talk to flowers and talk to bugs. The main character's mother is already in an asylum because of this, and eventually like it starts happening to her as well. However, it's not madness, and Wonderland is a real place that our main character gets to visit. So I was a little bit worried about this one going in because it's published in, I think it was 2013, and I just thought it was going to be like really cringy because of that, and it was, but also kind of in the best way. Like it felt quite nostalgic. I just always forget, because I love the aesthetic of Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, I always forget that I don't actually like the story of Alice in Wonderland, because I don't really like whimsy when it comes to books, because magic and frivolity for the sake of magic and frivolity with no explanation of why it's happening just doesn't work for me. And so that was the same issue with this. I wish I was an Alice in Wonderland girly, but I'm just really not. One that I was really sad to DNF was actually Fruits Basket by Natsuki Takaya. This one is it's not a contemporary manga series, but the focus of the story is the contemporary elements with a magical twist, and it's following this girl who finds herself homeless and on private land, and the people who own the land take her in and allow her to live with them, but they do have one secret, which is when they are hugged by memory, or touched I think, by members of the opposite sex, they turn into the animals of the zodiac. So this series definitely hints at like having darker topics that are going to come to the forefront later in the series. Overall, I just didn't really get invested in it. I thought that it was okay, it was relatively enjoyable, but then after like asking some of you guys and getting some information in my comments, I decided that if I do want to pursue this story, it would be both cheaper financially and also on my time if I just went with the anime instead of investing in the manga series for something that like I only kind of enjoyed and wasn't super invested in. And then the final one that I think I'm DNFing, like with the Dark Prince Road series, I could be convinced to continue. I just don't see me actually prioritizing it anytime soon, and that is the Knock 'Em Out series by Lucy Score, which is a series of small town romances. So I recently read the first book, which is Things We Never Got Over. That one is about a woman who runs away from her wedding, and her twin calls her and asks for help. So she comes to this small town called Knock 'Em Out, and her twin essentially just screws her over, steals her car and a bunch of money, and leaves our main character with a niece that she didn't know that she had to look after. The The love interest in this one is the town grump, who at first assumes that she's her sister, who is essentially the town menace, and when he finds out that she isn't, he kind of helps her get on her feet in this town and helps her niece, but he's like very much Mr. No Commitment. So this one was just way too long. It was so long. I think it was almost 500 pages, which is just unnecessary for a contemporary romance. I also thought that it was just a little bit on the nose with the small town vibes, like the names of some of the characters. It was kind of like, it was like Riverdale and I just couldn't get behind it. The reason why I'm kind of low-key DNF in this one is because I'm not really interested in book 2, although I am very much interested in the pair for book 3. I wouldn't read book 3 without book 2 just because I can't. I'm a type A personality, I can't do it. But like I said, I could be persuaded to continue in the future. If I ended up on a desert island and it was the only book there, I would not be opposed to reading it. But as I don't think with all of the books that I currently have to read on my shelves that I'm going to be running out to read book 2 in this series anytime soon. I actually think my patrons might want to put book 2 in the Patreon jar though, in which case I will be potentially continuing this series. So we'll just call this one a soft DNF for now and we'll see what happens. So here are all of the series that I have either completed, am currently up to date on, or have DNF'd in the year 2024. In a couple of days you will be getting the second part to this video, which is all of the series that I've started or made progress on but need to catch up on, and maybe I can do that in 2024. I'm not promising because I'm struggling to stay on top of anything. I do want to say actually I did have a goal to read twice as many sequels as series I start this year. It started off real strong. It's not currently real strong. I have currently read 22 sequels and I've started 15 new series. So I am currently 8 books behind on the sequel category. So I am hoping to kind of do something to catch up with that at some point. But it's shelve it or scrap it, man. I'm having a great time playing it, but it's getting me to start a lot of new series pretty rapidly. But down in my comments, let me know what is the best series that you've completed so far this year. And if you guys would like to let me know that you were here, but you don't really feel like you have anything to say, leave me like a pink emoji down in the comments, any pink emoji of your choice. But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram, and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish candle website, the Etsy for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye.
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.